In a speech at a clean energy conference in Las Vegas today, U.S. President Barack Obama announced new measures aimed at making it easier for American homeowners and businesses to invest in green energy improvements. They're part of Obama's goal of cutting overall U.S. carbon emissions by 26% to 28% over the next decade. Here are some of the initiatives. The U.S. Department of Energy will add $1 billion in loan guarantees for solar energy, storage, and smart grid technology projects. $24 million for 11 projects to develop innovations that can double the amount of energy each solar panel can produce from the sun. Construction of a 485 megawatt photovoltaic plant to produce enough energy to power more than 145,000 homes in California. And ramp up energy efficiency in more than 300,000 low-income households and invest to help decrease their energy bills. It's time for E Squared. Tom Rand is Senior Advisor, Mars Clean Tech Venture Group. Ken Green is a Senior Director in the Center for Natural Resource Studies with the Fraser Institute. So Ken, let's start with you. What's your reaction to these announcements from the White House?
Well, this is a big grab bag of subsidies, loan guarantees to incentivize consumers and businesses to adopt the so-called clean energy, whether it's solar power or wind power, other kinds of non-fossil fuel, non-traditional power generation. And a lot of this has been available to businesses and consumers for years, if not decades. Generally speaking, they've turned up their nose at these technologies because they've done the cost-benefit for themselves, and it doesn't work out. And in fact, a recent study of 30,000 homes in the United States that underwent residential efficiency retrofits found that the cost wound up being twice as high as predicted. The savings were less than half what was predicted, and the overall rate of return on investment was minus 10% per year. So there's reason to be dubious about these programs.
And what do you think of that?
Well, residential retrofits are probably the hardest thing to sort of push into the market because people make decisions about their homes for all kinds of reasons. I've seen different numbers than the ones that Ken just gave, but fair enough. I think what Obama has done, it looks like a mishmash, but what he's really doing is saying, look, what can I do with presidential executive orders only, because I haven't got the option of passing new laws. I have a Republican opponents who haven't done their climate risk homework yet. So he has only executive orders available to him, and he's saying, well, what are the market gaps? Right? Because the market isn't perfect. The market has gaps in it. The market has inefficiencies and irrationalities. And how can I fill those market gaps to help establish a foothold for the technologies that are going to solve the problem? Because don't forget, he's also given the EPA a directive to establish some limits around CO2 emissions. And in order to fill those objectives, they're going to need some new technologies. And those new technologies face substantial gaps in the market. And he's saying, how is it we best fill those gaps?
Okay, but I mean, you're talking, Ken, about studies that have already shown this is not terribly efficient. Well, now, guess what? That other alternative of oil is so much cheaper. Does this not then suck even more incentive out of doing these type of upgrades?
Oh, certainly.
Is $1 billion enough?
Yeah, certainly in the transportation sector, we're already seeing, in the United States, we're seeing increased sales of sport utility vehicles once again, reduced sales of hybrids and electric vehicles. And at this the lower prices for oil right now, it's hard for anything that would replace a fossil fuel or oil, I should say, oil and gas, it's almost impossible for those to compete. Now, the theory is the oil price won't stay this low forever, but they're now calling for a significant length of time where it will stay low. And so trying to bring some of these technologies on the market now is really swimming upstream.
Right, so the time to put a price on carbon is when oil prices are low and you won't hurt the economy. So it's a great time to put the big solution in place. But oil doesn't compete on electricity quite so much, certainly in cars a little bit. No. But really what's happened there is nat gas. Nat gas has been low for a long time. Even with nat gas as low as it is, solar is competing, right? Solar is coming down in price very, very quickly. And in particular, those loan guarantees the Department of Energy is offering are very, very useful. They're useful because R&D doesn't come out of a lab and scale up to the gigawatt level without hitting what's called a big gap around bankability. And bankability is the willingness of banks, commercial banks, to lend money at low rates for large energy projects. And until a bank can do that, a new technology simply will never compete because their cost of capital is so much higher than a nat gas plant or a coal plant or whatnot. And that's the gap that those loan guarantees are filling. And I would note that they have been around for a while. They are very widely used, and they have a 3% default rate. So they're very well targeted. targeted, and I think Canada would do well to copy that. We have some very important emerging companies coming onto the scene right now, as we speak, negotiating contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars in jurisdictions where loan guarantees, bankability, are the gap they need to overcome to compete.
Okay, but now, Ken, you've already said you're not crazy about Obama's plan. You're probably not agreeing with Tom that this is something that Canada should do. What should Canada do in this regard?
Well, I think there actually is one element of the president's plan that Canada can look into, which is the funding, increased funding for fundamental university level and national lab level research into energy technologies that can outcompete existing fuels and energy sources on price. I think that's an area where the government could fruitfully look at doing something useful. I would disagree with Tom pretty sharply on the whole idea that the government has really been a great success in the United States at lending money out. It's been a while now, but people have not forgotten.
It's a 3% default rate.
Forgotten Solyndra and First Solar and the various other companies.
It's a 3% default rate.
That collapsed.
Look, only in the hallowed halls of a think tank could someone think that pure R&D can hit the market without those kind of incentives. I invest private capital in private companies in the real market, and I'll tell you, the real world is a lot messier than this idealized notion of fund R&D, solve the problem. That R&D cannot compete and cannot scale until it gets into market with things like loan guarantees and gigawatt scales of production.
My smartphone would disagree with you, Tom.
Your smartphone is not
I have a phone that's wired into the wall.
Your smartphone
and it didn't take subsidies to get my smartphone.
Your smartphone is not energy infrastructure, Ken. There's a core distinction between infrastructure and phones.
Are you saying the telephone infrastructure was trivial? As I recall, there were many millions upon millions of telephone poles and miles of wire.
I'm saying your iPhone is not like a solar plant. They are very different things. One is big wires, one is little wires. To trivialize that difference really misrepresents the kinds of barriers real entrepreneurs operating in the real world face in building companies.
Well, I would have to say that I think there are any number of examples of things that get built without subsidies from the government, natural gas plants, for example.
Fracking was, the Breakthrough Institute did a long report on all of the support that fracking got from the federal government. It didn't come into the market by itself.
But none of what they got from the government actually went ahead and worked as technology.
Nonsense.
Okay,
absolute nonsense.
that's it, guys.
Read the report, Tom.
All right, you'll have another chance to go at each other next week. Thanks for being here, both of you.